So let's do a couple more examples here. I'm going to start with this one. 4x squared minus 6 equals 42. 4x squared minus 6 equals 42. If I were you, I'd try this myself first and then come back and watch the video and make sure we get the same answer. So on this one, I'm going to start by moving the 6. So I'm going to add 6 to both sides. So I get 4x squared equals 48. Then to get x by itself, I'm going to divide by 4. So I get x squared equals 12. This one, when I get ready to square root, because to undo the square, you're going to square root both sides. But when I undo the square on the left side, I get x. And on the right side, I have plus or minus, but this part will simplify. 12 goes to 3 times 4. And the square root of 4 is 3. So it's going to be 3 square roots. Oops, I said that wrong. This should be a 2. So it should be 2 square roots of 3. Now, I want you to notice where I put the 2. The square root of 4 is 2. The 2 goes in between the plus or minus and the radical. Because if I don't write it in between and I write it like this looks like 2 plus or minus the square root of 3. And we know that any number that comes out from under the radical is being multiplied times the radical. So it's got to be written like this. Okay, let's do another example. 3 parenthesis x minus 2 squared equals 36. So I want to solve for x. I want to find out what could I put inside here, m for x, subtract 2, square it, times it by 3, and I get 36. I should have 2 answers because it's an x squared problem. So if I was working this, I would subtract 2, then I would square it, then I would multiply by 3. So since this is the last thing I would do, that's the first number I get rid of. So I'm going to start by dividing by 3. So these cancel. I have x minus 2 squared equals 12. Next, I want to, if I was working the problem, I would subtract 2, then square it. So that means I have to get rid of the squared next. And the way that you get rid of square is square rooting. So on the left side, now the square root and the square undo each other, and I get x minus 2. And over here, I'm going to have plus or minus whatever the square root of 12 is. And we just saw over here that 12 is 4 times 3, so it's 2 square root 3. So now I have to get rid of this by adding 2 to both sides. Now watch where I add the 2. I'm going to put the 2 directly in front of the plus or minus. So I get x equals positive 2 plus or minus 2 square root 3. It would be the same thing to write plus or minus 2 square root 3 add 2, but this is not standard form. So when you put your answer in Delta Math, this will be incorrect. They want you to write it with the number coming before the plus or minus if you're adding or subtracting it. We'll do another one like that. Let's do this one. 1/3 parenthesis x plus 5 squared equals 7. So the first number that I need to get rid of is this 1/3. And it's 1/3 times this. So I'm going to divide by 1/3. But the way that you divide by a fraction is to multiply by the reciprocal. So the 3 in the numerator, 3 in the denominator cancel. And over here, I'm left with x plus 5 squared equals 21. So now to undo the square, I'm going to square root. So I get x plus 5 equals plus or minus square root 21. And now I've got to move the 5. It was plus 5 on this side, so when I move it over here to the other side, I would be subtracting 5. So my answer would be x equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root 21. You guys try this one. 1/5 parenthesis x minus 4 squared equals 6. So pause the video, try it, and then come back. So this is an x. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of the 1/5. So I'm going to do that by timesing by 5. So numerators cancel. So over here, I'm left with x minus 4 squared equals 30. And then I'm going to square root both sides. So I get x minus 4 equals plus or minus. And then the square root of 30, that's just 2 times 15. So 2 times 3 times 5. Nothing's going to come out from under this radical. Nothing can be simplified. So now I've got to move the 4 over here in the front. It was minus 4 on this side, so I'm going to add it to this side. So it becomes positive 4. Now in delta math, I don't know if you can write it like this. You may have to write 4 plus the square root of 15 and 4 minus the square root of 15. You'll have to experiment with that. Okay, last one I want to do with you is this one. X squared divided by 4 minus 2 equals 0. So let's think about what number we would get rid of first here. If I was working the problem, I would square a number, divide by 4, and then subtract 2. So that means I've got to get rid of this subtract 2 first. So I'm going to start by adding 2 to both sides. So I get x squared divided by 4 equals 2. So now I have x squared divided by 4. The way that you undo divide is to multiply. So cancel, cancel. I get x squared equals 8. I'm going to move that up here so I have room. X squared equals 8. So now I'm going to square root both sides. So I get x equals plus or minus square root 8. But square root 8 will simplify to 2 times 4, and the square root of 4 is 2. So it goes right in here. So it'd be plus or minus 2 square root 2. Those are the two answers that work for x. Positive 2 square root 2 and negative square root 2. 2 square root 2.